The year after Wendy and I were married, my parents celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. So we threw them a party along with my sisters. And I remember thinking two things in that moment. The first thing I thought when I looked at my parents was they're pretty much at the end of the road. 25 years, this is it, pack it in. Your years of productivity are over. Kind of move off the stage, move towards retirement, wait for the grandkids, and that's pretty much it. Because we were just married, starting out on our journey, and that seems so far away. The second thing I remember thinking is they've pretty much got it all together. Like they've got it all figured out. Like there may be a few things, but they're not worried about things. They're not anxious. And when I get there at 25 years, I will feel like I've got it all figured out. We'll be married 29 years in July. I feel like I have nothing figured out. I mean, my kids may look at me and they'd be like, oh, yeah, they got it together, but I feel like a few things go sideways and this whole crazy train's going off the rails. I think if my 25-year-old self could look at my soon-to-be 51-year-old self, like he'd have some questions. I feel like my 25-year-old self might be a little disappointed, be like, you haven't got this figured out by now? Like there's some stuff I thought we'd have figured out by now. I mean, like money, retirement, like we're doing okay, but a significant part of my retirement strategy is ignoring Dave McNaughton's calls. It's probably not a good strategy. There are some things I thought we'd have figured out. I think one of them is friends. Like I never thought friends would be a problem. I never thought friends would be an issue. They just happen. It's not something I'll ever need to really think about or work on, or for sure, never something I'll need to be strategic about. It'll be like on TV. It'll just happen, and you find them where you live or where you drink coffee or where you'll just click and laugh, and wherever you might go, you'll find friends, and they'll be easy to make. My 25-year-old self would say to me, really, you don't have this figured out yet? Now in my 50s, it seems like one of Jesus's greatest miracles was that at 30 years old, he had 12 guy friends. Like that, I didn't realize how awesome that is. You need friends in ministry, and you need friends who are in ministry. Here's what I want to do in the next 17 minutes and 9 seconds. My goal in the next 7 is to convince you that if you are going to finish well in ministry, peer friendships are necessary, not optional. And here's why I want to prove this to you. My motivation, my reason for doing this is so that you don't burn out, blow up, bow out, or become bitter. To me, that's my definition of not finishing well. We talk a lot about finishing well. You'll probably hear some people talk this weekend, I hope so, about finishing well. Not finishing well looks like burning out, blowing up, bowing out, or becoming bitter. And one of the ways you're going to finish well is by having friends in ministry. And I want to talk to you about that this morning. Here's the problem. You and I think it's not a big deal. We think it's not a big deal, friends. It's like heated seats in the car. Friends are like that. It's nice to have along the way, but they're not important to get you to the journey. Not essential equipment for arriving at your destination. We think the relational isolation we intentionally or unintentionally allow, foster, or even pursue is not a big deal, and it's just a choice or a preference or an unfortunate reality of ministry life, and it doesn't hurt us or anybody else. The problem is that's a lie we tell ourselves, and one the enemy of your soul and of God's kingdom and mission is happy to have you believe. We think the isolation and loneliness has no real impact. The research paints a different picture. The majority of us feel alone at some point. Loneliness has a cost. 52% of pastors say in the last 3 months, according to Barna, they felt lonely or alone at some point. It costs us personally with our physical health. According to the former Surgeon General, it's linked to 29% increased risk of heart disease, 32% increased risk of stroke, 50% increased risk of developing dementia, 60% increased risk of premature death are linked to loneliness and feeling alone. These numbers put social isolation in the category of having a greater negative impact on a person's physical health than smoking daily and a greater mortality rate than obesity. Loneliness is literally killing us. We would intervene immediately if a pastor started smoking 2 packs a day, I hope. But many pastors are dying from isolation, and we call it dedication. Rather than something to be applauded as Lone Ranger grit and fortitude, the pastor going it alone ought instead to be pitied and helped. One survey found that feelings of loneliness and isolation figured into a decision to resign ministry in nearly 1 out of 3 cases. It's more than just individual costs, though. There's a cost to the people around you. Tom Nelson, in his book, The Flourishing Pastor, says pastoral isolation is a toxic seedbed for burnout and scandalous behavior. The damage done to pastors, their families, congregations, and the collective witness of the church is beyond description. You might read that quote and think, well, that's not me. I'm not isolated. I'm with people all the time. Of course you are. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. But keep in mind, loneliness is not about whether someone is alone, but whether someone feels alone. Nelson is saying that when you feel alone, you do harmful and stupid stuff, hurtful stuff. One study done at Duke University, funded by the Willie Endowment, found this: social isolation is highly detrimental and to be avoided at all costs for pastors and ministry people. Don't rush past the phrase "at all costs." Essentially, their findings state that everything else should be sacrificed before sacrificing friends and close relationships if you are going to flourish in ministry, if you're going to finish well. The wedding for that board member's daughter, serving at one more homeless shelter meal, one more counseling call, the invitation to serve on a network committee, the opportunity to speak at network conference. It's all good. And it all should be on the chopping block before cutting sustaining friendship relationships. Isolation is not maturity, and loneliness is not a ministry strategy. We applaud the person who goes at it on their own. Our society, sometimes our training, and maybe even our Assemblies of God culture has communicated to us that on your own, frontier mentality, Lone Ranger, CEO, lone missionary, do it on your own and you get praised. That is not maturity, that's foolish. Sometimes necessary, but not always. Often a choice. You might not be burned out, but maybe you're experiencing a brownout. You know the difference? Ever have a brownout with your electricity and your power? Some of you may not be burned out, but you have partial power. You come here on a Monday morning, your lights are dim. Some things work, but maybe not everything. You're not really sure what will work and what will not in a brownout, right? The fridge, maybe. The furnace, haven't heard it go on in a while. Blow dryer, clothes dryer, probably not. Many ministers aren't burned out, but they live and accept life and ministry in perpetual brownout. You can get out of bed and function. Will joy work today? Not sure. Empathy, care, vision, optimism? Probably not. And we think that we have to be satisfied with a life that way. You don't have to live this way. Friends in ministry is the cheat code to flourishing and finishing well. One way to think about the solution is with this concept that I've come across called borrowed light. Francis Rouse, 16th century Puritan politician, said this. He said this: when the soul is in the dark and her own light shines not, she may do well to get a guide. And take heed to borrowed light until the day dawn and the day star arises in her own heart. I love this term, borrowed light. Borrowed light is not merely private encouragement. It belongs to a practice of non-isolated faith. Borrowed light is the grace of letting another believer hold gospel clarity for you when you cannot hold it for yourself. Borrowed light is not weakness. Borrowed light is how God keeps us from confusing isolation with maturity. It's what happens when Christ's light reaches me through someone else until the day dawns again in my own heart. Borrowed light is not fake light. It is mediated light. It is the light of Christ refracted through another believer when your own interior sense of God has gone dim. Rouse is not saying live permanently on someone else's spirituality. He is saying when you cannot see, let someone who can see walk with you until you can see again. Borrowed light is meeting with ministry peers regularly. 73% of pastors with high risk for burnout, according to Barna, reported they met with other pastors only a few times a year or less. Contrast that with 71% of pastors with low risk for burnout reported meeting with peers at least once a month. The pastors most at risk were often the least connected. I say peers because the kind of friends you have matter. This quote on this next slide is too long. I'm not going to go into it. I shouldn't have put it on there, but here's about what it says. You can have 50 people bring you soup when you're sick. Let me put it this way. But if you feel like they're doing it because of your title, you will still feel alone. That's what the research shows. So you can be in the midst of a crowd, in the midst of relationships, in the midst of caring people, and you're saying, why don't I feel loved or cared for? Why do I still feel alone? Because the type of relationship matters. Those are good relationships, but they're still going to leave you with a gap. Other relationships are good and can be helpful, but they don't replace the peer-minister relationship. Congregation, board, staff, friends, spouse, they're all great, but you need peers and friends in ministry. Numerous times when I've been going through a difficult time and I started talking to Wendy about it, she would turn to me and say these words, you need to go talk to your friends. She says this for two reasons. One, because she doesn't want to carry the burden. One of us needs to be healthy at this time. And two, because she knows what talking to my friends does for me, and it is something she can't give to me. Peers know and understand the situation and ministry without you having to explain the pressures and intricacies of it. Peers call you back to your post, that you are last to that mast. Peers understand what's at stake if you leave. Peers understand what you have on the line, the pressures on your family. They know your kids' names. Peers understand why you might want to quit, and peers are in the game with you. This benefits you and your ministry. The study for sustaining pastoral excellence found that belonging to a peer group legitimizes activities that many pastoral leaders intuitively knew were necessary for long and vital ministry, but found difficult to squeeze into their schedules. Here's what that looked like. These pastors that were in regular relationships with peers, more often they would practice Sabbath. They would laugh more. They would spend more time with friends. All those things they didn't have time for, somehow they found time because being in relationship with peers legitimized those experiences for them. Congregations with pastoral leaders who participated in peer groups were significantly more likely to promote a culture of involvement that actively assimilates newcomers and fully involves members in leadership. The church is going to be healthier when you have friends in ministry. Your church is going to benefit when you have friends in ministry. If there are so many benefits, then why don't we do it? Why, even after hearing this talk, won't you do it? It's the old illustration of the helicopter and the boat and the flood, right? You're asking God for help. He's already sent it, and it looks an awful lot like the face of the pastor in the next town or the next chair. So why won't you do it? Here's why you won't do it. One, because it feels unproductive. Considering the numerous ministry responsibilities and expectations of pastors, it's not surprising that cultivating friendships with peers may not be a high priority. There are pressures of church leadership, a community to engage, the gospel to be preached, and a lost world to reach. This being the case, any time spent investing in friendship is often deemed time away from the important work of ministry. Danielle Strickland at this year's Exponential Conference said this: Christian leaders are the hardest ones to help because their addictions are applauded. Pastors are often rewarded for the very patterns that are quietly destroying them. Addicted to affirmation and deriving identity from usefulness. Second reason why you won't do it is because the work never gets done. Back in November of 2015, Nick brought Gordon McDonald into the network office to share with us, and something Gordon said that day has stuck with me. It hit me harder than anything else he said. He said, "We say we're going to get together with friends, but what we mean," Gordon said, "is I'll get together with you after my work is done." But the problem is the work never gets done. Third reason is because the pressure to justify value through measurable output. Coffee with your friends doesn't add to your budget, attendance, or your ACMR numbers. There's no deliverable. Pastors often feel pressure to justify their worth through measurable output. Sermons count, attendance counts, budgets count, meetings count, but friendships feel unproductive. Friendship doesn't always look productive on the calendar, but it may be one of the most productive things you do for the long-term health of yourself and your ministry. Finally, the reason you won't do it is because it's just one more thing, and you've got enough things on your calendar. But it is something that can make the biggest difference in your ministry. Are there people who finish and do it without this? Of course, the exceptions always make the rule, but why not? Why would you make it harder than it has to be? Here's my pressed pastors group. Here's the group of guys that I meet with once a month. There's Dan. He's on the right there, and his wife. He pastors a congregational church right down the street from my house in town in Billerica. Top left is Colin. He pastors a great non-denominational church he planted 6 years ago. They just put an offer in on a building that is less than a mile from our current building, and I'm praying he gets it, because our few hundred people in our couple of churches is barely making a dent in the 25,000 souls in the town of Burlington. Frank, he's down on the bottom left, Frank Federa. Some of you might know him. He pastors up in Peabody, a Pentecostal non-AG church up there. And bottom right, David, he's our newest guy. He pastors the Southern Baptist Church in Billerica, and they're doing an awesome job. It was cool. David's, apparently their church has a missionary house. I didn't know that. One of our missionaries came and spoke at our church. He says, "Oh yeah, I'm staying at the church at the house at New Colony." I'm like, I didn't even know David had a house where he housed our AG missionaries, apparently, when they come and visit. These guys aren't my competition. These guys are my friends, colleagues, and fellow workers in this field. My competition is soccer games, apps on a phone, porn. It's anything that's trying to drag the hearts and minds and souls of men and women away from their God-ordained and God-created destiny. These guys are fellow soldiers, teammates, not the competition. They are brothers serving in the harvest field. Here's the hidden trade-off. Many ministers sacrifice friendships for ministry effectiveness only to realize later they sacrificed both. That's the hidden trade-off the enemy's trying to make you make. That I'll give up friends, I'll do it later because the work of the ministry has to be done. And the reality is you get to the end of it and you realize the research shows you'll end up sacrificing both. Because you will be more effective in ministry. You will be more likely to finish well if you foster those friendships. My daughter is a summer girl. She dislikes the cold. In fact, she's about to graduate in 2 weeks and move out to California to go to college. I think she's just chasing the UV index, but I hope it's God's will. One spring, I said to her, "Wow, it's getting warm. Summer's coming." She said to me in that moment, one of the most profound things any human has ever said to me in my life. She said, "You are losing a game you don't have to play." She said, "We don't have to live here. There are places in the world where it's warm all the time." When you carry the pain of ministry apart from community, you are losing a game you don't have to play. When you and I carry the pain of ministry apart from community and relationships with peers, allowing us to experience God's healing and helping work through that, when we don't borrow light, we are losing a game we don't have to play. Peer relationships are not a luxury. They are one of God's ordinary means of sustaining grace. And so here's the questions to ask yourself this. You need to put a name at the top of this next slide of these questions. What is the name you're going to put there? Insert name here. Who is your quit call? Who's your quit call? Anders Eliasson couldn't be here this morning. I don't think. I was texting him this morning. He's my quit call. Anytime and every time I feel like quitting, I call Anders and he picks up the phone and we talk. What do you do in the moment when quitting is not an option, but moving forward feels impossible? Who's your quit call? You got to have a name there. Who can tell you when your light is dimming? Who has permission to speak truth into your life? Who can you borrow light from? You got to have a name. Who's the name you'd put in there? Who's the friend? And finally, for your board, for those, whoever is over you in accountability, your board, your elders, the network leadership, whoever's over you in accountability, and you better have someone over you in accountability that you're accountable to. This being the case, here's the KPI for your board or whoever is overseeing you. This question is what they should ask you every time they meet with you. Who are your minister friends and how often do you meet with them? You want to help your pastor's mental health? Then ask her this question. You want to protect your church from scandal? Then ask this question. You want your pastor to finish well? Then ask this question. You want to see more effectiveness in ministry? Then ask this question. And if the answer is less than once a month, the next thing out of their mouth should be, what can we do about that? How can we help you fix that? Because we care too much about this church. We care too much about your family. We care too much about the mission of God, and it is too important to let you get away with not having friends in ministry. Thank you.